everybody in this room to understand what just happened. That's all phenomenal. Those are really strong tactics, right? She executed some really smart tactics. What we are talking about, what's going on in that world outside the Javits Center, and what we all recognize is happening, is that we've all fundamentally agreed that the music labels have been disrupted, right? Napster came out, music labels have been disrupted. I think people have to understand what's really the fascinating thing that's currently happening right now, and there's not enough discussion about it, is that communication has been disrupted. The way you engage with your users, you didn't have to get lucky and show up on the Today Show and get those eyeballs. You went out and grabbed it. I mean, that was the story of my life, right? I started the wine thing. I didn't move to LA to start a wine show. I just sat in my office in New Jersey and executed it. We are seeing dramatic disruption in communication, and every person in this room should know, and I think does know, whether it's business or culture, whether it's throwing over governments in the Middle East, whatever you want, communication is such a fundamental structure of our society, and it is getting screwed the hell up.
Well, it's changing, Gary.
And I hope you understand I meant screwed the hell up in a good way.
No, I think that, by the way, I said ass first, he said hell, because there's a lot of people betting on who's going to say the F word. We're taking bets. So, for those of you who know, Gary and I have been on stage many times before. We've been shut down in many countries, actually, for being lost. I'm going to tell you that it's changing. It's not that it's totally, I mean, it's not that it's flipped. It's not that it's gone over to the other side. You can still get on the Today Show, or used to be Oprah, and never do a tweet and sell a best-selling book.
No question.
All right, so it's just a different way. What it is, it's opened up different lines of communications that you can no longer ignore. I mean, I will agree with you, it's gone mainstream. Without question, social media is now mainstream, without question. And so that's the difference. It used to be that companies, big companies, books, publishers, whatever, we fed stuff to our customers by forcing them to deal with us our way or a way. It used to be you dealt with a big company by an 800 number. That's how you got through to them. You pressed the numbers and you memorized the numbers in case you ever got hung up on. You have to call back again. We all know what that's like. But now this has opened up a different line of communication. And what it means for us is that you want to see a book, ebook. I still like to read one the old way, and sometimes I like the ebook. In fact, I'd like to have a model where I can buy the damn printed copy and the ebook, so I can read it whenever I want to, however I want to, in the cloud, on the toilet, okay? And wherever I want to be able to do it. And that's the difference in the way it's being done, is now as a consumer, whoever that is, and it doesn't make a difference whether it's a critic, it's a blogger, or whatever, they want to get it their way, and as authors, we should be giving it to them the way that they want to get it.
Well, I think that poses a real big question, right? As, what are the publishers, the people in the middle, going to do about it? Because we're only willing to be so frustrated for so long. You're not using a publisher, you went direct to consumer. I sure do, and listen, I'm extremely happy, and the people I work with are lovely beyond, extreme, but, you start looking at the finances of it, and you're like, I'm the one who went on the 60-city book tour, right? I mean, for somebody to print something on paper, I think, just like Kodak, what were those numbers again? Repeat them for me, again?
15 billion to 200 million.
I think very much we're going to see similar things happening, and the publisher's going to have to figure out how to be valuable to the author, or the author's going to go direct to consumer, period, end of story. Period, end of story.
Well, HPU actually started self-publishing. You're now moving into also having gotten a book contract. Talk about that a little bit. You're going the other way.
I'm going the other way, but I have two series, one of which Random House actually came to me, and were interested in publishing it. The other one is still going to be an easy self-published book. But what I would say that I've seen in the self-publishing industry is that we're definitely turning the publishing industry, I think, on its head a little bit. And what's happening, it's not necessarily a negative thing. And what I think happened for me is that by getting a following and showing that I'm selling 200,000 books on my own, I was able to show Random House, hey, you don't have to take as much of a risk on me. I already have a following. So in a way, it's a good way to bridge that traditional publishing / self-publishing gap. And I know a lot of people are still interested in self-publishing in as much as it can lead them to a traditional contract. So for me, at this point, I think it's the smartest move to have a foot in each camp And so I think self-publishing absolutely let me get there.
The real question will be, and Jeff, you know this, it's all about brand. When actually having a book doesn't have the cachet and the brand equity it does today, and that's bleeding on an everyday basis. When HP looks at her financials at the next book and says, wait a minute, I made more by doing it myself, and I didn't have to do X, Y, Z, B, D, E, and it becomes a very fascinating debate.
Again, the debate then becomes about what you're trying to build and how you're building. I mean, you know, for me, I've got a couple television shows I'm going to be doing and so forth, but I use the book as a business card as much as anything. I'm out doing speeches at X tens of thousands and so forth, and so I want to. I go out. I mean, I remember when I went to my publisher and said they said, well, you get 100 copies as part of the deal. I said, 100 freaking copies. I won't even cover my umbrellas, you know. So I said, I want to buy. I said I want to buy 10,000 copies, and they were like blown away. Well, what are you going to do with them? You're going to sell them? I said, well, man, I won't sell those. I want those to give away, you know, because I can do a letter out to 1,000 CEOs, and as I did the other day, and book 17 speeches from that letter to 1,000 different CEOs. That's a lot of freaking money, and that's well worth it to me. And I had to go buy those through a distributor to get those books, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I don't have the options as you do with the ebook to be able to zip those out, or I probably do that as well.
How is your relationship with publishers? Do you think you make their lives easier? Do you make their jobs easier? Talk a little bit about that relationship and how you've evolved with your publishers.
You know, I have a very good relationship over there. First, I worked with Debbie Steer, now Hollis, over and they're wonderful, and I'm super happy. But you know, at the end of the day, I have no idea why a publisher would ever sign a deal with an author that isn't willing to work their face off. You know, of course I made their job easier. Steph, you know my scene. I worked until my eyeballs fall out of my body, right? And so, like, if I'm showing up and hustling and doing everything, of course I made their life easier. What publishing has done for me is just absolutely right. What is your finish line? When I signed my book deal, I wanted that $10 million deal in the press. I thought it mattered for my brand. That mattered more to me than actually writing the books, right? I wanted to get ahead of the conversation. I felt that I was right about some things. So getting in a book mattered. And nothing for nothing, a lot of my new tech friends always bust my chops like, Harry B, why don't you go like Godin and go direct to consumer? Why are you still, writing books? I'm like, because people read them, asshole. People read books. I like them. And plus, don't forget, I'm a retailer, right? I built a wine shop. I believe in retail. I like the indie bookstores. I like when people are going through Hudson News in the airports. There's the thank you economy. That matters to me. So you've got to understand what the value is. The problem is that every day that goes by, as people go more digital, as the reality of the actual marketplace we live in, not the one that you wish it was, changes, you start debating the true value. And that's where they're going to have to adjust.
Yeah, I think the publishers, we have a great relationship with our publisher, my editor, Rick Wolf, and now my new editor, Mary Glenn. I love those guys. Now, I don't think their business teams are as strong as they could be in terms of marketing.
They suck.
Well, I won't say that because I'm still working through my contract. But anyway,
as soon as you sign it, you're going to say it.
Yeah, well,
admit it, you're not. These are not nice people.
Different.
Tell the truth.
Yeah, I'm
Go
different.
on.
Shut up. I'm a little different. I'm a marketer. So I'm a little bit more, in their face about the marketing. What are you doing? What are the assets? What are you building? I'm on their ass every 5 seconds. So we're ahead of it, in terms of that. And I also, with my first book, I remember taking everything in the advance that we had, and we went out and hired them. We went out and did the things that we had to do. Most publishers don't do, or authors don't do that. The other thing I think that you're looking at for most things, the strongest thing the publisher brings to bear for I think most of us, and this for those that are publishing on the traditional side, is the distribution. Once the distribution's gone, then it becomes a different kind of game. So then it becomes about how you build hearts and minds, like HB you're doing, which I think is phenomenal. And then truly, it's going to be a game really about substance, not style. And I think that's where it's going to be harder and harder for a lot of authors, and it will be measuring in a different way. Imagine what it's going to do to the New York Times bestseller list. Imagine what it's going to do for the USA bestseller list, and so forth, because it's going to be done differently. You can game the system today. I know authors who go out and buy their way on those lists, and in the future that's going to change.
Easy to do, right?
It's nothing that it's nothing that $60,000 can't go and do, but
the problem is didn't, right? So the inner circles know, I mean, the amount of people that have bought their way to the list is shocking. And it's an industry thing that people know, but I think that hurts the people behind those brands. I mean, you know, I know the people that did it, and there's certain people that I respected pre them buying the way to list, and now I don't, and I think they're hurting their brand equity. We live in a transparent world. That kind of stuff is not hidden.
Do you see it likely for a lot of digital talent to go to publishing companies and to transform from the inside? I mean, if you look at someone like the New York Times and how they just radically changed their business model, I mean, what would it take to get publishing companies to, you know, make some really big strides?
A company that are going out of business. You know, that's what we react to. When a big guy or one of the big guys or gals falls, everybody's like, oh crap, I don't want that to happen to me. At this point, if they haven't, I mean, I'm blown away. You know, I went selling my book in 2008. I can't believe I'm sitting here in 2011 and things look pretty much the same. Everybody's just holding on for dear life. When one fall, at this point, in 2008, I would have answered you differently. So somebody's going to take the lead and execute. Now I believe, based on what I've seen this industry do, they're going to wait for somebody to go down, and then they're going to be scared into it.
Well, what I've noticed is that it seems to me that the publishers at first, and it's kind of, I would say the agents and the publishers were a little bit wary of the self-publishers and kind of saying you don't necessarily want to go down that route. But now, I've seen a lot of them are getting really smart, and instead of fighting it, they're going after them. They're saying, hey, you know, ebooks right now account for about 30% of total book sales. Let's print you and get that 100%.
I think the game is more about not who's going to go down, but who's going to go up. And I think we're all waiting. Okay, Seth made this announcement. Is that going to work or not? I think eventually it will work. I don't think it'll be as great as everybody first thinks, because you got to work that list, you got to work the marketing, you got to do all those things that traditionally you could have, like gone on the Today Show, you get on that and go do the city tours, go do the radio tours for 14 days in a row, sit in a hotel room in your shorts, and talking on the phone for days and days and days, which we've all done. And, but I think it's going to be whoever rises, and so how successive those new models are going to do it, not so much the demise. There's still going to be, books aren't going aren't going to go out of style. They're not. I mean, for all you say, they're not going to, because there's still people who want to read them. I mean, look at the kids that line up for Harry Potter. In 1980, Charles Wang said there would be a paperless society by the year 2000. Remember that? The only thing that was in the year 2000 was a wingless society. Okay? So well, that's freaking funny. I don't care who you guys are.
The audience is never wrong.
The audience. But my point is, I think it's going to have to take somebody really rising with the models to make it really work in a massive way for that to be easy. And I don't think we're at that tipping point yet.
Though when you look at it, one of the biggest things that clings me to a publisher is retail distribution.
Absolutely.
If somebody comes out and innovates in that space and says, okay, you do your thing, and you go direct to Kindle and all these other devices, and I'm going to be your printing back end, and here's the deal and a half for you, $3, let's go. Or what, 7, 9, 2, whatever. There's, so you're right, Jeff, it may happen that way, but somebody can come out of left field and disrupt distribution, go make deals with Hudson News, go make deals with Barnes & Noble, go make deals with 3 or 4 other places we want to be, have a center that indies can buy from, and now we're looking at a very disrupted, different marketplace. That's a possibility.
Well, some of those are. I mean, I don't know if CEO Reed's in the room.
Sure.
I mean, they're awesome.
I visited them a couple weeks ago in Milwaukee.
And they're awesome. And they do a great job. And I think they have the ability to do a lot of that stuff. They've been a big factor of ours because we have, I'm a corporate guy, meaning mostly corporations, companies, and small business guys hire us, or that's the kind of groups I speak to. And so they tend to buy, like this morning I went to a group and, I signed 300 books, Tomorrow I'm signing 1,300 books, right? They buy hundreds at a time. Well, they're not going to the local independent store. They're going to somebody like CEO Reed to buy it. And that's how we sell most of our books.
So, and you've used retail and book signings as part of your community building strategies. It's not just, especially Gary, definitely not been just online for you. Can you talk a little bit about how you use?
Yeah, I mean, the thesis of this book is that as we all go more digital, the equities in the humans, right? And so somebody asked me the other day, he's like, Gary, do you still believe in the book tour? And I'm like, crap, that's the only thing I believe in. Authors cry about that and they don't want to go on tour. I only want to go on tour, creating context. I'm thrilled that I'm standing here right now, or sitting here, and 20, 30 people right now are creating different context with me, whether they like me, they don't like me. Context is being created. Hitting those, ridiculously small towns. I want to go to Wyoming, and I want to go to like
Harvey McKay does that.
Yeah, I mean, then Harvey's the one smart fucker because
Okay, whoever had 32 minutes wins the pool.
I agree with Harvey. I will not hit New York, SF, LA in the next one. I want to go to like the most ridiculous.
Go to Kansas City. You'll get 10 times.
No, I was Kansas City. I did. I liked Kansas City. I'm talking like, you know, give me something weird. I need something weird.
Hoboken.
New Jersey. I'll go there.
You know, it's true. HP, have you interacted a lot with your fans through book tours as well?
I've scheduled my first book tour, which will be in Seattle in August, but I tried to think about ways, just because financially, I don't know if it's smart to hit all those until my books come out in the traditional way, but I think about ways that I can connect with my readers, and a lot of that is through things like on Facebook, I have HP's online book club, where I've got now, I think, about 700 people, and we talk about books that we read together, and they're so interested to find out, well, what's HP reading? We like her books, we want to find something that's similar to that. I also have HP's online writers club, so I started that because I have a ton of writers sending me emails all the time and asking me the same questions, so I just thought, well, I'm just going to start a club and answer them all at the same time.
And you're also giving advice on how to self-publish.
Yeah, prior to quitting my day job and becoming a full-time author, I was the director of online marketing. So I took everything that I learned over the past 7 years or so and applied it to self-publishing. And because of the fact that I had a good product to start with, and by good I mean the cover looked professional, it didn't look like my Uncle John did it. And it was free of grammar, spelling errors, stuff like that. I then basically hit the ground running. I spent probably the first 2 or 3 months every day, 3 hours, contacting book bloggers, asking them, hey, do you want to read my book? And surprisingly, they did. I got a lot of really good reviews, which then helped Barnes & Noble and Amazon push me up in the rankings. I spent a lot of time on forums talking to people and introducing myself, introducing my books, and not just selling, because the thing that I noticed is people would get on and they just pitch, and people got really angry. It was really about making conversations, not selling. And so figuring that out, that's what my whole model has been on, because for me, it's crucial to get that word of mouth. And so I have an email distribution list that I set up, and I mention that on everything.
Yeah,
and basically,
that's a 2,000 person opt-in.
It's 2,000 people I've got so far, and I probably started it 6 months ago. And I basically tell them what's in it for them, sign up, and I'll let you know as soon as I come out with a contest where you can become a character, or as soon as I come out with new books. And I get emails all day long. And then the other point that I would really make that's really important is that when anybody sends me a message, if they sign up for my email distribution list, if they contact me on Facebook, anything at all, I always respond to them right away. I definitely have a sense of urgency, and I think that is another thing that's been really helpful for me in terms of getting my name out there.
You must have read your next book.
She did. But she executed, that's what my first, everything she just said is my first book. It's what I did to build Wine Library TV. Every person in this room, and I know a lot of people, I can see a lot of faces I know, we are of the dawn of one-on-one marketing. The big boy companies that this man comes from, obviously with VaynerMedia, we now have insight to that, not on his level, but I'm hanging out there. That's hard for them to understand or grasp or love, because, scaling is a question.
Segments, I call it segments of one.
Absolutely.
That's where we're at.
We're in the same place. That game is in play. Every person in this room, whatever message, story, whatever you're trying to accomplish, the way to understand how to scale that and manage that is the ball game. Period. End of story. The amount of content and competition that is in play now is incredible. Any person here can self-publish on platforms and be in play right away. And so that's why I believe, the one thing I would disagree with is when I heard you say, I'm not sure if that's financially, the right thing to do the book tour. For me, in my mind, I'm like, well, you're getting 70% of $299, and
You have to pay off student loans.
Fair enough. But to me, there's nothing more important. And I scale engagement online as much as anybody. I know a lot of people here know my spiel. But the real stuff, like you know, I like to hug it out. I want to, you know, I want to touch my fans. I do stuff like this because I want to meet 4 or 5 people. There's a couple people, Steven, I met him in the street. I can engage with him a lot, but that handshake in the street, that matters to me. Seeing a lot of people chow, I don't see him a lot, I see him online, but like a little, you know, a human, you know, the human stuff is always going to matter. What I think people misunderstand is the tech stuff is the human stuff. It's a gateway drug into this, right? Twitter is weed.
So